strategic partners as his national outreach coordinator.
All of them, so work with committees on that.
All right, Eugene Kinlow, Office of Federal and Regional Affairs for Mayor. All right, thank you. I know we have a few people on the line, Kim.
Adam here has joined us, and we're ready to start.
Okay, great. Well, look, I've got a PowerPoint presentation. I think I can take us through it quickly. One that kind of highlights where we are and where we're going, and probably a little bit of where we've come from. Let's see, the mayor, if this is a slightly modified version of a PowerPoint that the mayor presented, that was, yes, that the mayor had this morning in front of her cabinet meeting. So this was presented to the mayor this morning by Beverly Perry. We made most of a few modifications. Okay,
There's our microphone, so
I'm sorry, I don't know, is there any chance you can turn the volume on the phone or maybe move it closer to whoever's speaking? I'm not really hearing.
okay, great. I'll try to project just a little bit
these are
more.
microphones.
Awesome, thank you, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's see. So first we started, let's see, some benefits of statehood. So why do we want statehood? One is because, Congress continues to tell us what we can do with our own locally raised dollars. We've seen it recently on budget autonomy, where the courts have already ruled and said we can control our own dollars. And Congress, at least the House, has said no. Marijuana legalization, Congress has stepped in on that issue, abortion funding for low-income women, gun laws, and there are a number of other areas in which we are constantly being, where Congress forces its interest upon us. And other things that we can't do because we're not a state. For example, at the meeting the day earlier, someone said, well, the National Guard is generally controlled by the government of the state. Here in Washington, D.C., we don't have that ability. It's a nicety that we have a National Guard, but they don't respond to our needs. Yeah, that's okay, so the Advocacy Working Group. I mentioned that the mayor has created 5. This one is to engage the business community to identify, leverage, and direct resources that can enhance statehood activities. There are a number of people in this room who attend other working groups. A lot of those ideas that are flowing from those working groups will have a cost associated with them. So we're hoping that this is one of the committees that can turn some of those ideas into reality. The first launch of the working groups, it was just probably about a month and some change ago. Okay, so the new Columbia Statehood Commission, it's comprised of the mayor, the chairman of the council, and the 3 shadow representatives. It was established in 2014, but it has only been this year where it has really been activated. The commission has been meeting regularly to create a plan for statehood. Okay, so normally there are a number of methods for statehood, but what this mayor is working on is what's called the Tennessee model, which means that, and the Tennessee model based out of the state of Tennessee, which joined the union after doing a number of things. It's called that model the last state they employed. That model for statehood was Alaska. Let's see, the commission developed a plan, and the plan is a tight timeline. In the past, it would take maybe the process that we're on would take about 3 years. We're trying to do all of this in about 6 months. So it's only been April 21st that the commission approved the statehood plan. And on May 6th, the commission released a draft constitution. And this is this document right here. Hold on to it. We're hoping that it's going to be a keeper. The work that was done for this involved quite a few of the key attorneys here in Washington, D.C. So this is a draft constitution. We have to be about the business of creating a new constitution. It's the mayor's position and many members of the commission that we have a constitution that's more contemporary. There was the voters did ratify a constitution in 1982, but it was not supported by Congress. And in 1987, the DC City Council adopted the constitution as well. But it was never presented to voters. We're in the process right now of a process with engaged residents to weigh in on a draft constitution. One more, Kim. Where we are right now, there are numerous opportunities for people to engage in the draft constitution. The first meeting is tomorrow night over at Dirty Bags. We've got 4 town halls citywide. They will conclude on June 8th. And then following that date, there will be a few other opportunities as we create what we're calling our constitutional convention. So we're going to open it up on the 13th, and we are going to conclude it on the 18th. And then in the following week, we're going to, well, not week, but the commission will meet, vote on the Constitution, and then refer it to the council in its operations. The one thing that I didn't mention was the June 9th day. There are a number of working groups, and there is a hope that there will be recommendations that will be forwarded and presented to the commission on that day. This timeline right here extends into January 21st of next year. Think about it. We just started this process about 45 days ago, but the goal is that we'll have this in front of the DC Council at the end of this month. July 8th, a referendum is filed with the Board of Elections. In September 15th, Board of Election certifies the language for the referendum, and 2 months later there will be election on November 8th. Now what does that mean? That means that the issue of statehood will be on the ballot on November 8th, and a lot of the things that you hear and see associated with the statehood campaign are so that there is a good result on Election Day, November 8th. I don't mean 51% or 60%. We would like to see, and I believe it's a good thing to have a large group of citizens come out and support statehood. And once that result is in hand, what do you do with it? Well, the goal is to present it to the new president on January 21st. On January 20th, the president will be sworn in. We don't know who it will be, but we know that there will be a new president on January 20th. So on January 21st, a petition will be submitted to the new president, and it is our hope that we'll have the president present this to Congress. All right, so I mentioned a little bit about the ballot and the things that we need to do to become a state. Well, there will be 4 questions on the ballot. And the first one is, do you want to become a 51st state? Do you approve the state constitution? And do you agree to the boundaries? And the last one is, do you commit to a representative form of government? So, on the ballot, on election day, we want people to vote in the affirmative. Yes, we want to be the 51st state. Do you approve the state constitution? We're doing that in advance. That's what we're doing all the work with this document right here. Do you agree to the boundaries? Well, you know, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, I believe, defines the boundary of the federal government. And it says it should be no more than 10 miles square. But it does not say how small it will be. So we have an idea of what the federal district should look like. And it should not comprise the full measure of the District of Columbia. It will be a compressed area where the federal presence will reside, the White House and Congress. So the working groups that I mentioned earlier are all 8 wards, all Americans for DC Statehood, Advocacy, Communications in Cleveland and Philadelphia. All 8 wards.
What's the difference between Advocacy and All Americans for DC Statehood?
Well, All Americans for DC Statehood is about making sure that there is a 50-state message on statehood, creating relationships and activating those relationships. For Advocacy is really more business advocacy. This is more about the resources that it will take to project an advocate, to project our advocacy outside of the district. and throughout the city.
Oh, I mean, when I'm going to go big, something like that, I would maybe change the wording of this, it's kind of confusing. If advocates, just say finance committee or finance,
We don't want to scare too many people, I think that may be.
Campaign finance, more or less say finance.
or resource committee, you know what I mean?
And that's a great idea. We'll forward that back. I think there's still an opportunity to make that shift. The All 8 Wards Committee, of course, is about what we can do right here in Washington, D.C. It's one to make sure that every ward is a part of this.
One thing I would also, maybe it's not place this committee, it's maybe I should just talk to somebody. Because you're not here to hear all my different comments.
Sure, well, I'd love for you to talk to Senior Beverly Terry.
I can talk to her.
Yes. And then we have communications. I know there's a number of people here in the room that have been a part of the communications committee. And they're working on documents. I think they've developed a palm card and a new website will be live next week, and they're working on a few other projects. And the last committee is the Cleveland, Philadelphia Convention Committee. It's the one time this year that media will descend on one place, and and it's a place where our elected officials are pretty much held hostage, and one where a lot of messages can be magnified. We saw it, I guess, in 04. Was that in 04 in Boston? But I think you made a way as mayor to display the fact that residents of the District of Columbia had no vote in Congress, and there was an opportunity you created an opportunity to educate people, other elected officials, and party members about that. So I think that we want to duplicate
Step that up, because we were very polite, and look how polite we were.
So I think that this year there are 2 conventions. Of course, Cleveland.
You have to start with polite,
Start with polite, loud and boisterous. I think we can do that. Yeah. And I think that's it through the PowerPoint. And this is just a version of PowerPoint that was given earlier by Ms. Perry from the mayor and the mayor's cabinet just earlier today. We want everyone, of course, to visit statehood.dc.gov. One, you can leave comments on the draft constitution, and we need that because this process is going to conclude very quickly on June 18th, and we need as much input as possible. We want people to join the working group, and we want people to volunteer. And so with that, I just wanted to share that information with you, kind of good background on what's really happened in the last 45 days. Tremendous amount.
You want my comments from the business point of view? I think what appeal to business people, one is you have to find room for business people. If I'm a business person and I believe we should have 2 senators and a congressperson, but don't necessarily understand, if I talk to a lot of business people, say, well, I don't think we should be a state, but we should have 2 senators and a representative, and we shouldn't be in Maryland. You have to find a way to have room for them. They don't want retrocession into Maryland, but they also don't get the state thing. So you have to show them that, an example, there are many ways at this, but one example would be, look, we've done a constitution, and I heard this on the radio, and I thought it was very becoming. We've done a constitution, we're not adding a whole new level of government, we're just basically constituting the district government now as a state government. That would be appealing, but I think addressing that is one. 2, certain things, when you talk about the benefits of this is my advice. I think they're all true, but I would be very delicate about the National Guard, because the reason why the DC National Guard and Air National Guard are so extensive, they're like 25 F-16, something ridiculous. It's not because we're DC, it's because the White House and the Congress are here. I wouldn't push so hard on getting control of the defense apparatus.
Okay.
I would concede that, let them have that. We want to be a state, and we recognize, which is my next point, we recognize as a state, we have among all the states a special relationship with the national government. We concede that. I wouldn't push on that. But big issue with business leaders, and you can think about this and figure out a way to make this appeal, is back in the day, right, the reason why a lot of people in Maryland and Virginia are against any representation, let alone statehood, is because of the commuter tax. Because basically, if you have a commuter tax, it's really not affecting the commuters from Maryland and Virginia. So it's basically knocking off whatever we end up charging, $600, $700, $800 million. But it's not going to be that high, because we're not going to make it, because it doesn't have to be that high. But it'll be a significant amount of money from Maryland and Virginia, so I'm saying they don't like that. So what you've got to convince, the argument you've got to make to the business leadership, including Maryland and Virginia, they should be our allies, is to say, and notwithstanding Donald Trump and Bernie, we're in a global economy whether we like it or not. To be in a global economy, we have to compete at a global level. To compete at a global level, we have to compete, not just D.C., but Maryland, Virginia, and D.C., all the way from Baltimore to Richmond have to be competing as one entity in this global economy. And that, if you're in Maryland and Virginia, get your head out of the, I'll be polite and say out of the sand, there's another place you can get your head out of, the sand, you're going to get a lot more from us having two senators competing on the global economy than you're going to lose with your little $400-600 million deficit in your budget. Because we're going to be armed at much greater firepower on this global stage. If you have 6 senators, think about it. If you have 6 senators, 2 of whom are going to have a lot of seniority fighting for the region, then you're 4. That's the argument.
Excellent. I think that's a strong argument, one that I haven't
To
heard.
get them over the commuter thing,
Again, so maybe this is a good time to kind of reflect on some of those
Don't you think that would resonate that much?
I agree. I haven't heard that put in the context of 6 senators before, but we often talk about our regional economy. And, excuse me, all of me as soon as I bring up like the mayor's trip to Cuba. We had the Secretary of Commerce from Virginia with us. We had people from Maryland, we had people from Montgomery County. So we are a regional economy. And I agree with you, 6 senators could protect this region because the region is fed by the federal government, and we do need to protect that. I agree.
The other 2 things I would say is try to find, create an entity that's standalone from the district government that can receive funding, so you're not running afoul of them. I mean, you're already running afoul of them, defying them in other ways, so I don't know if you want to just add to the list or keep some things out of the firing line with them. You could say, we're going to really defy them and just appropriate DC money for advocacy. You're not supposed to do that. You could totally define that way. Or you could say, okay, we're defining them along these lines, but as it comes to the fundraising, we have a separate entity to receive the fundraising. And then in terms of the fundraising, find some creative ways to raise money. I mentioned to you, I think crowdsourcing is a potentially great way to raise money for this, not only from DC citizens, but from people around the country. Good crowdsourcing site can raise millions of dollars.
Yeah. So Tony, why don't we just kind of expand a couple of ideas that you talked about, I guess making a case for why we should be a state, or why we should have 2 additional senators. We talked about the regional focus. I mentioned I had a few reasons up there, and of course those don't work for everybody, but our goal is to try to figure out how we can, connect the business community. We created, and this is just a draft document right here, and if you could take a look, if you guys could pull out some of these documents that you have in the package. And this is effective DC's, Washington DC disenfranchisement. So we've got a good quote, and many of those things are a blend of a number of your quotes, and it highlights a number of reasons why businesses should be supportive of DCs and cants in terms of statehood and making sure we've got senators and such. One is, congressional oversight creates uncertainty for businesses. When there's uncertainty, you pay more. I think the market is always reflecting that. We've got limited influence on federal laws and regulations. A lot of businesses do business here in Washington, D.C., but who do you call on? If you're here in Washington, D.C., we've got Ms. Norton. But if, we've got a lot of major businesses over here in Washington, D.C., and they would love to have a senator they can call on and say, this is what I need. That's what they have to rely on, where they're incorporated in other places other than actually where they are. So, taking the ideas that Tony Williams mentioned earlier, and some of these ideas, are there other reasons why businesses should think about supporting
This is Brett. So the business community is extremely frustrated with the environment from the city council. They're just extremely frustrated with all the regulatory changes, things that are happening left and right. This doesn't really address what would be different if DC was to stay. So I would, as a suggestion, I would say, is there another paragraph, couple of sentences that you could put in here as its own bullet highlighted section that would make it different? Or is this going to create another layer that the businesses have to deal with in operating in Washington? That's a great question.
Well, I think maybe this is before you got here, I was saying, I think actually one of the things they've done is make clear that they aren't creating a whole new layer of government, which I think is good. But I think one of the things you're alluding to is, one of the things this would do is, like, if you're trying to develop something in DC now, you've got to deal with the DC process, which is okay, fine. But you're also going to deal with a whole federal overlay to the DC process that has nothing to do with the mall or the national property. It's just because they have a right to comment on whether you can put an addition on your house. What's the architect of the Capitol got to do with an addition on your house? Right? Or what you're going to do with your business. That's a layer of federal oversight that goes to, I think, what you're talking about. Or is it, it's just one example of it.
It's one example, but I think that, if we were to spend more time with this piece, I would want to talk through some more, as a business that operates here, I spend a lot of time in the Wilson building, we track everything that's going on in the government, and the businesses are extremely frustrated with the climate here in DC. They don't feel like they're connected, they don't feel like they have a say in what's going on, and so I would want to pull out of this group, how would this be different? That would make the business care. Right now I don't think that they would really, pay attention to it.
Well, one thing that we've talked about a lot, the largest or the most frequent comment we've heard is that the size of the legislature needs to be increased. So I don't know, if that is going to happen, but from a business perspective, right now we have 13 people. And it's a small group of people that can change, that can make a law, and that can change the way something is done. If the people are heard, because they feel that we need a larger size, it could be good for business because you could have a larger legislature and the opportunity to create all of the special interests. I mean, it might be harder for all of that special interest legislation to get passed because you have more people. You're going to need a larger, you'll need a larger number of people to support those initiatives. And like right now, in Washington, we have every liberal law that is in America. We have medical marijuana, we have grow your own marijuana, we have, right to shelter. Everybody, every homeless person has a right to a hotel in Washington, We have every liberal law there is. If we had a larger legislature, maybe we would have some people that would, and I'm not knocking those things, I'm just saying we have all that. But from a business perspective, you need to think about that. And that's one of the reasons that the federal government doesn't trust us to be a state. Because we have, we grab a lot of everything.
But speaking from a business group, and I totally agree that, we're trying to do things to try to recalibrate the public policy, because we think it is kind of off-kilter. I love that, great friend, but that's our position. But that said, I think we need to be careful in that, and I'm saying this as somebody who runs a business group, we have to be careful if you're looking to build a broad coalition.
Yeah, we are.
You don't want to tie the structure to specific outcomes, At the same time, you're right, to get people on board, you got to show them
You
something.
gotta give them something.
And there's a tension there,
And a kind of a different side of the argument that was occurred this year is that we're running and people say, well, this government was formed quickly by Congress, and maybe it's time to throw off those colonial shackles. Why are you guys looking at 13 members of the council as your leaders? Why aren't you looking at a larger number that's more representative? If you go to some states, like New Hampshire, they've got one of the largest state governments. They have about 400 some odd.
20% of the people in the state are
Is that right? Well, it's a big number. So that argument has been made.
It's like 300 something.
It's a pretty big number. In other states, it ranges, to 40 and even smaller.
But I think a better argument for business is that, and it's what Mayor Williams talked about, it's the tax structure. If you read Kobe's article on Saturday, you saw that we can't even tax our own employees that don't live in the city. And so that's $100 million that goes outside of the city. So our taxing authority is so narrow. So guess who pays that? That's why business have to pay more.
I think that's a very good point,
I think that's a better argument.
because the tax system's all contorted to make up for the lack of community. It's not 100 million, it's like Trump. What is it, probably now 15 billion tax base. So basically you contort it. So if you were able to have a commuter tax, you actually could have a more competitive business tax.
Exactly. That is the business argument. It's $100 million just for the employees that work for the DC government that do not live in DC.
I was including federal government.
Yeah.
So I would just suggest that we spend some time getting some of those nuggets on this.
I agree.
So ones that jump right out from the top, but we don't have to, I don't want to hijack the issue, but I just.
No, and back to your point, and where we kind of started, this is a draft document. It hasn't been circulated beyond the folk who are in this room right now. We shared something that was similar a couple weeks ago, but it can be better. The goal is to have a document that makes a case to business, a business case, and why businesses should be supporting statehood, because it's not. It's part of salesmanship and self-interest, so we need to make sure that we identify those interests that businesses have and articulate them so that they can be our strongest supporters. So, if there are any other...
Yes, we have.
Yes,
So,
sorry, Margaret.
I'm sorry, and my apologies for not being here at the beginning of the discussion, but there are 2 points of Singleton. I wanted to just revisit, and one is from a business perspective about the size of the council. And that I think that we totally will support that. Because when you look at, I think right now, the makeup of the council, we don't have people who actually understand business, because I said the majority of them do not have or run a business, and so therefore you see legislation that's coming for the last 2 council periods that are cumulative and impacting upon the cost of doing business here in the city. I also think that when you start looking at terms of your 6 representatives, if you have a workforce, and I think that sometimes we forget that we have business owners who don't live here in the city, I think if you do begin to take this as a regional approach, I think that they're going to be more open in terms of some of the issues that we have to address. So I think that there is an advantage if you're going to be looking at equal representation so that we are able to be equal partners, I think, when it comes to regional decisions.
And I also think the taxation issue is integral to this. And one thing about the commuter tax, if you're looking at a regional solution, you could offer a solution that we share a commuter tax. And even though it wouldn't be totally fair, it might be a way to get people on board to say, look, it won't all go to the district. You could share that in certain endeavors.
Is there a model for that?
There's a model in Pennsylvania set one up. I don't think they ever really enacted it, but Pennsylvania tried to set one up. But,
You could say that all the money could go to infrastructure that everybody uses.
Yeah, they could. But if you're trying to get them to vote for you, and a lot of them learns, for example, in that state, that's a perfect example. They're in Maryland. Almost all the money that they generate is in D.C. for the team, but their business is located in Maryland. So they might be available, but their interests aren't so particular by our having 2 senators. So you're trying to persuade people not only in the district, but I think you're trying to persuade a lot of people.
On the issue of the legislature and number of legislators, I think it's a very valid point, but the Constitution, the document we're basing everything on, doesn't offer any changes in that, right? It's still 13. Okay. So are we...
No, I just made a comment that that's the most, the comments that we are receiving, that is the, the highest number of registered complaints around that. The reason it's only 13, the reason that the Constitution, if you look at this Constitution, it pretty much pairs the home rule charter, and except those things that have been changed. We have been advised that we should send this initial Constitution up as is. We don't want Congress to think we're trying to expand. We can always do that. We get statehood, we can be anything we want to be. But we want to make sure that we go to Congress looking stable. We've had a stable budget for 21 years. We run our government well. We have good bond ratings and stuff like that. We want to go looking like, we just gonna maintain that stability. We're not trying to change anything. But that is one of the comments that we get.
So the business case could be, if we get statehood in the future, we can shape...
We can change our tax structure, we can change our whole government structure, we can change a lot of things.
To be more...
And it would be more amenable to local business and that.
Thank you.
Great. So we're at the part of, I guess, the agenda where it's, let's see, how to best connect the business community to the statehood movement. And just as a background, you've got a set of documents in front of you. I just shared one. But there are, most of these documents are informational. In addition to this one document that we need work with to enhance and make it the business case, we also have a frequently asked questions about DC statehood and information on the Statehood Commission. So that's background, and we hope that you would get this, share this. This information can be found on the website at statehood.dc.gov. So please let us know your thoughts on that. Additionally, some other information in the package includes some very important dates. And that's for the meeting on the draft Constitution. I went through this just a minute ago, but here's a flyer that reflects that as well. And we hope that you would avail yourself, testify at one of them, whether your opinion is that we have our elected officials are number 5 or 50. Let us know. We like to get your comments. So the question that kind of looms large, at least one of the questions is how to best connect the business community to the state. I mean, what is that mechanism? who's involved, who is voting, message bearers be, and a variety of opinions on that. So I'm hoping we can think about it for a minute and create some answers to that question. So again, how to best connect the business community to the state.
General, Tom Brown. I'm just thinking about some of the comments I heard. Certainly, the piece that Mary Ann alluded to around the community tax, but more so what I heard from Brett. I think part of what we have to consider is some ownership from the business community. Not driving at them what it is we're proposing, but sharing design to the point where they may have to host some of these same sessions from their side of the table in a collaborative posture with the public side. I think in forming the Ward 8 Workforce Council that I chaired with Marion Barry, that was exactly what my task was. We had so many organizations that didn't used to do any business, didn't like each other, didn't know how to do business with each other. So my biggest job for those 7 years was to get entities and organizations that otherwise don't even communicate to figure out collaboratively how we step together in something that we all cared about, which is high unemployment in Ward 8, right? But we had to learn early that the original group that formed, that Marion selected, with me as the co-chair, I had to look around and say, I have to make sure everybody who wants to come to the table feels like they own what we're building and what we'll sustain. And I just think that this is a great step in that direction. We just maybe look at some other steps, because when I hear resoundingly that the business community has some thoughts, we need to make those thoughts very clearly a part of our agenda. And it may cause us to have to make a slight shift in what the original agenda has been, and maybe in this current state is. That's why I appreciate that it's a draft. But I do think I think it's smart for us to give some ownership to the business community by way of design. Don't know anybody's reaction to that, but that's what I believe is a smart play to allow the business community to be clear that they're part of this and they're driving it from the perspective that matters most to them. It may not be as important, or maybe cause us to have to give something up that we maybe thought was right.
Right, Tom, that's a great point. I think that in talking about design, before you can get to it, you've got to start at a level of just participation, getting people in the room. And one, I just want to say I'm encouraged by this process. One, we're here this evening at the Federal City Council with former Mayor Williams, who was strong on the issue of local rights, and who's now part of the business community. Here I'm encouraged because of people like Ms. Singleton here from the Chamber of Commerce. In the last several meetings that we've had, actually when we rolled out our working groups, we've had Jim Denninger from the Greater Washington Board of Trade, who attended, I think, about the last 3 meetings that we've held. And some were just more generic in general. But so we've seen engagement. Now the question is, how could we can transition from the conversational to the building, the kind of the architectural piece in terms of design. Small businesses have an interest that's different from larger businesses, but I think that we've got to find those common threads and make that business case and bring the small and large together.
Yeah, I think it's in the language. I think one of the areas that we'll find it is in the language, because once the final draft is completed, I believe what I'm hearing from the leadership in this conversation is there are going to be clear points that the business community would have crafted that'll be part of the document that'll jump out. They won't have to look for their identity in it or their value in it. It'll be a glaring part of every piece. And that's kind of what I was alluding to, is that piece right there is going to be, I think, one of the most key, the instrumental pieces in galvanizing the business community, where it won't just be the organizations that represent them, it'll be the individual organizations jumping to make sure they're associated with that language that represents my itch every day as a business owner, large or small.
And to add on, I would think we're just going to need to flesh out those kind of details that go along the lines of the tax issue that Beverly was talking about. How does this affect me as a business owner every day? We're going to need a sheet on that. How does this affect me as a DC resident, which is a separate sheet from the business owner sheet? I mean, there'll be a large business owner sheet, a small business owner sheet, there'll be a DC resident owner sheet. I mean, some of the language around statehood, if you pay attention to it, if you understand history and voting and the Boston Tea Party and all that kind of stuff, yes, you get it. But I think for your average person walking around, they're not really paying attention to it because they don't connect it to themselves.
I think that's a good point. Let me just say, because this is a good time just to figure out where people are from. The people who feel it the most and understand the need for statehood, and from what I've seen, are people who've had senators and member of Congress that moved here in Washington, D.C. because they had to give up something. So how many people are actually from someplace else, like Washington, D.C.? So I would say a majority, and if you look at Washington, D.C., there are quite a few people who make Washington, D.C. their home, who have moved here and did not know that they were going to give up 2 senators, the power, relationships, and access. So I think that provides for at least a starting point. But I think that we can and will work on the effects, how the lack of being a state, the lack of representation on Capitol Hill affects this directly.
Another thing that might influence people would be to show how senators in other states bring business into their states. I mean, they move whole sections of government into their states to generate business for their small businesses and jobs for their residents.
I want to focus on 2 issues. First is tax, and the second is funding for small businesses. So as we can see the model from other states, Delaware, Nevada, California, Washington State, all states have no corporate taxes. Why cannot DC follow the same model as other states? We've already legalized medical marijuana. Why cannot we attract businesses to incorporate here? That would be something that would be as of interest to business owners, not large corporations, but existing small business owners as well. And the second part is funding. I believe DC Statehood will increase funding to small businesses and to existing businesses. And yeah, I want to focus on the DCRA as well, the agency that's because I have a business in another state as well, and I believe that DCRA is a very good website, and the agency recently got new building. So my focus would be in terms of advertising through the DCRA, to the network of the DCRA, to small business owners, of the benefits of actual DC statehood.
If you follow with somebody at DCRA, it makes sense. Okay. So the question on the table is how to best connect the business community to the statehood movement. We've heard some ideas. And while you think about that, I just wanted to say that based on the number of meetings I've attended, the working groups and beyond that, I sense at least 3 real near immediate funding priorities of pressure. One is the political convention activity, and we mentioned it earlier, but the Republican convention will be in July 18th to the 21st. The Democratic convention will be July 25th through the 28th. So those are opportunities that begin next month, and we need to really, there are plans that are being developed in terms of advocacy, but they're going to need to be funded. I mean, I don't know how many people were there in Boston and in 2004, and I was there at the Boston Tea Party, or in 2008 in Denver, when there was, I guess we call it the event at the Mint, and in Denver, and then of course, I think in Minneapolis and all, people from Washington DC went out to be a part of those events. In 2012, it was Charlotte. And then for the Republican Party, it was in Tampa. So this year, they're closer, so I think that's an opportunity. There are a lot of ideas that are being generated. The chair of that committee, of the convention, the Philadelphia-Cleveland committee, is Councilmember Anita Bonds. And they've been meeting and generating ideas, and actually she co-chairs with Pat Mara, who is executive director of the DC GOP. So there are already some ideas, that's one. So political convention activity. Two, visibility in advance of the ballot initiative. Again, this whole issue of statehood is going to go to the ballot, and there needs to be a visibility campaign associated with it. Because on election day, a couple months after Board of Elections decides to move this forward, there's going to be an election. In an election, you need what? You need signage, you need probably some ads, you probably need posters. There's a lot of things that you need to support any type of campaign. And those things will have to go on November 8th.
Do they have to do for the referendum, do they have to do a stop signal campaign across the city?
Yeah. I guess an advisory referendum. So there's no requirement for you to pay and for signature. But so the Board of Elections will have to decide, and I believe that they'll probably decide to do it. But so how do you educate the large number of people that you're going to need right here? That it's the right thing to do, and that you get a good result. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is, we haven't even talked about what this campaign or the hopeful campaign looks like in 2017. Once it gets to the president, and then the goal is for the president to get to members of Congress, well, that's when you have to start thinking larger than the Beltway, larger than the region, and thinking in terms of 50 states, and figuring out where you need to go, the larger markets you need to communicate with, the media, all those sort of moving pieces. So those are just three things, and there have been a number of meetings. There's a lot of different ideas out there working in a lot of different groups, but those I would just suggest are three kind of priorities. There are others. Read your minutes. You'll see some other ideas that have been generated over the last couple of meetings, but those are three clear. Any thoughts or reflections on those?
I think, again, not to keep beating a dead horse, but I think you've got all Americans for statehood, and you've got this group, the Advocacy. It seemed to me you ought to have one group doing all the political operation, advocacy, communications, and promotion, and all that. And I thought this group was about raising the funds in order to do all that. But we seem to be merging the two. If we're talking about all of it, then what is All Americans for DC doing? I'm just confused, that's all. Does everybody else share my confusion? No?
Well, what I've tried to do is share a little bit of some of the ideas that other groups had. I'm sure there are a number of members, people here in the room who've attended a few other groups, group meetings.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm on the communications committee, and I think Eugene's just saying the different things we're going to need to do, and yeah, it would be, our focus would be, this committee's focus would be how to fund it.
Right. Yeah, we may not want to cut to the chase. They need to raise money.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, that's the $1 million question or the $10 million question?
I like the crowdfunding idea.
But one thing I think that makes it core, the entity that you use is going to be very important. So that's one thing we really need to look at too before we start deciding on methodology. What entity are you going to use to do this? Is it C4, C3? Is it going to be a 527? How are you doing this? Are there political implications? You may have disclosure. If you're doing lobbying, you may have to disclose in different states. So there are a lot of issues around that.
We're not doing lobbying, we're doing education.
Well, okay, one man's education, sometimes another man's lobbying, but,
No, we had a 2-hour meeting yesterday with campaign finance Vega, and the Board of Elections.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about in DC.
I know, and we have the lawyers there to advise us on the federal lobbying rules. And what we're doing right now, we're doing education. Once we get past, now next year, the lobbying will not come until after this is on the president's desk. And that is when we have to retool, and our efforts of advocacy will be different, because what we will be doing there, we will be specifically, and we don't have to do that then. What we will be doing is reaching out to people in other states, asking them to reach out to their members of Congress. Only Congress can pass this. So we need other members to vote for this. So we will reach out. That's what that all 50 states campaign is, to reach out to people in all 50 states to ask their members to vote.
So we're not lobbying legislators?
This is all education.
Okay.
This is all
So
education.
Beverly, when funds do come in, who collects it? What?
It's coming to the Statehood Commission. The statute authorizes the New Columbia Statehood Commission to, it confers the ability to raise funds. Yes.
And is that a state organization, or what's the entity?
The New Columbia Statehood Commission?
Yeah,
it's part of the DC government.
Oh, it is, okay.
It's co-chaired by the mayor and the chairman of the council.
So my question is, do we have a budget of like how much we need now for education and then how much we need in the future as well? Is there like a set amount that you're trying to raise?
Well, there is, from a person who's attended a number of other working groups, there are quite a few numbers running out there. There's a thought that a national education campaign, taking in consideration major markets and product need, might be upwards of $10 million. There are others that are saying, well, perhaps smaller and regionally, there are things that we can be doing now that include some of the things the communications committee is doing, creating palm cards, enhanced website, and using new technology.
Not to interrupt you, in my opinion, my humble estimation, you've got to move the Congress. Think of a number and think twice that number, is not enough. You're talking about moving a Congress. The way I look at this is praiseworthy, ingenious the way you organize it, but it's kind of like a flight. The first step is to get off the ground, right? And then ascending levels of credibility and momentum and, forward motion, right? And in order to do that, we got to get, a lot of firepower harness to move a Congress. And right now, odds are,
It's a $3 million campaign. Let me throw a number
How
out
much?
there.
How much?
At least a $3 million campaign.
Well, my main thing is just because a lot of the things are happening next month, so it'd probably be best to start doing a timeline, because depending like how many people do you want to send to Cleveland, how many people do you want to send to Philadelphia, how much does it cost per person to actually send these people, and then how much do all these materials cost, because I don't know if materials have decided what exactly is it going to be a sticker, is it going to be how much everything's going to cost, especially by July, because that's very quickly.
Well, I would think, how are your activities what I'm saying is, how are your activities that you're talking about, how would they reinforce and support the fundraising effort? So that, let's say you raise 2, you get some critical events, get wider exposure, then you're into 10, wider exposure, then you're into the numbers where you can do really major media to move the needle with them.
Well, and I totally agree. The question is, what set of activities might those be? And I articulated just a few, and I know one is a shorter time frame, because next month there's conventions. But is that a worthy activity to be involved in?
Yes.
When you ask the question, some people say yes. I don't get too many no's, but the question is, well, what will you do there? Is it about moving bodies, getting a lot of people to get up there? Is it about using the media infrastructure by making sure that you cover a building, you pay for covered buses, that you do, that you buy full-page ads, that you do receptions? I don't know. So I think it's
Why
good.
don't, why don't we say we need $50,000 to get through the convention? You know, 50,000, that would be reasonable, that gets you to Philadelphia, gets you to Cleveland. I mean, how many of the people you want to send? You send, you know, and pay for some handouts and, you know, some activities. Do we want to give a reception in Cleveland? Do we want to give a reception in Philadelphia? I think we do. So, you know, a reception in Philadelphia could cost you $30,000.
So are you saying 50 just for the conventions or 50 for everything until then?
I don't know, I'm just throwing numbers out. I'm trying to get us focused on money.
Exactly.
And not focused on, you know, all the activities. We need to be focused on money, how we raise it. We would like to hear people, do we want to just say, come back in a week and we give you the entity. The one thing that we haven't done, and I'll take responsibility for that, I apologize for that, we haven't said, make your check payable to blank. And that's what we need to, that's what we should have for you today. I mean, that's a weakness on our part. So,
We have a budget, like you were saying, you need a budget of what
yeah.
we're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're all over the place here. And to, I guess to consolidate this, the one question for you is, can since this has been established, and I'm putting on my political hat, I run campaigns on the West Coast, and putting on the political hat here, right? We have to run a full pledge operation, right? So since this is an established city commission, can the city commission play politically? Can you use city funds to play politically? That's
We
something.
can't use city funds.
Okay, so then what we need to do is we need to establish either a political action committee or we need to establish a C4 so that we can play politically.
You know, even though, and I take that back, where we ended up yesterday, although we don't have the opinion in writing, we requested the opinion in writing, what we heard on the phone yesterday, is that as an educational campaign,
Right.
we can use city funds.
Right,
We
but
can use city resources.
But if you're influencing the vote, which is what's going on.
We're not there yet. The
Okay.
vote is next year. We're talking 17. When
So-
I throw out a number like $3
That's
billion,
17.
I'm talking about all the way through 17.
With the referendum though, since we're taking this to the ballot, does that mean?
That's education.
Okay, so that's purely education. That's not
Purely
the-
education.
Okay, so then there we go. Then we can use the money that's established in the account or however the financial
Yeah.
institution set up to use that then right then and there, why don't we go into just planning fundraisers? Right? We have the money in the city, we can do a gala of some sort. Or we can do a DC night for statehood, where we have the DC night for statehood and we have X,
Let's do a 4th of July party on
Exactly.
the 3rd of July. Have everybody dress up in red, white, and blue.
Every
Come
person,
and
every business is
make a
represented.
donation to
$5,000
DC.
All the tourists too.
Yeah, all the tourists.
$50,000 we just raised.
The statehood.dc.gov, statehood.dc.gov, the website for the commission, can it have a donate button?
No.
No.
So
I'm not
so even though the commission
Well, you know what, because.
can collect the money?
Because when, you know, it's different.
Anyway,
The
just
city-
wanted to mention that. Because
the city
people
can
want to
accept
pay with their
grant money.
credit cards, people want to pay online, so.
We would have to create an independent entity, and that, we would have to create that outside of our
That's
operation.
what I thought.
What I would like to see is someone in the business community to take it on,
Okay.
create that entity, so we don't have to worry about
Right.
all of those,
Right.
That's your political action.
all those cards, but not political action committee, because, yeah. And
That makes sense.
for someone to take that on and not have that come through us. Because if it comes through us,
There we go.
I mean, we have to put it into grant thing,
That's
you know,
It's just for
Okay,
education.
let me,
just for education.
I'm just trying to understand. Okay,
Now we're just dealing with education.
okay, so for the education component, that can go through the DC Commission, is that correct?
It can't go through the DC Commission.
Okay, correct. For anything other than the education
We
component,
can't do political.
you need a separate entity.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So there's a lot of things we can do in education, as you know.
Yeah, sure, there is.
So
You know, we got a population greater than 2 states, but no member of Congress and no senators.
I just have one other question on education. Is there any restriction as to who can give to the DC for the education to the DC Commission? Foreign nationals, can foreign nationals give, can federal contractors give, can anybody give?
Sure.
I would think, but I'm not sure, I just want to make sure.
There's the legal.
Foreign nationals can give to nonprofits.
Yeah, they can't give to nonprofits, but they can't give to.
This is a nonprofit.
That is a question we
But it's
posed.
a government arm, see, it's not just a nonprofit, it's a
We
government.
posed that question. We sent our memo to all three entities, to Vega, Campaign Finance, and the Board of Elections. We expect a response back from they told us they would do it quickly, probably by the end of the week. I can't tell you whether contractors, but what we said was, on the call, was because all we're doing is education. We are doing, see, right now, the Constitution, framing the Constitution is the same as the mayor and the council putting forth legislation. It's just a policy agenda.
Okay.
But after November 8th, when it's on the ballot, it becomes a different animal. Yes.
Okay, great.
Then it becomes political.
So then it would be wise now to set up that entity that can support it. It could be 100% autonomous of the education portion.
Exactly.
So then in order, because the last thing we need is to raise all this money, and there's one slip up, and we get one donation from the wrong person, and now DC can't manage funds, and there's no reason for DC to be a scam. And so if you set up an entity, so if it's for the education component, then it could be a nonprofit. If it's for the political component, it could be a C3, it could be a C4, it could be a political action committee. But we set up the entity now so that there's a funding institution in place to save DC in case there's one slip up of maluse of funds and one slip of policy.
And I'd say 527.
Right. 527. Yeah, exactly.
Now, we've got probably about 10 minutes or so this evening. We've got a lot of great ideas, I think, that are there's some definite recommendations, I think, that will be pulling out of it.
I just have a historical question. You recited all these other instances in which the city represented itself at national conventions, evented the Mint, Tea Party, etc. Where'd that money come from?
Pardon the interruption. Your conference contains less than 3 participants at this time. If you would like to
Yeah, that was my question. The last time we did this and in the past, where the funding.
But let me just say that I know that for a number of them. Yes, sir.
I can't speak for Avery or Vince or the current mayor, but in my time, we've got fully disclosed business contributions to support our mission to the convention and our reception, and knowing that we would also have as a centerpiece of the reception, full representation of statehood. So one way is to get business community support and sponsor fully disclosed, the events.
But Mayor, I think when you did it, I think we did it through the Democratic State Committee, didn't we?
Yeah, they had to disclose.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that's a known entity.
It might have been.
Yeah, I think it was. I think we did it through the Democratic State Committee. Yeah, I think when Sharon did it, Sharon had the business community to. People just raised money and did it independent of the Democratic State Committee, like a group.
She was secretary.
Well, I mean, that's a question. You could do it as part of the committees or as this separate entity that you're talking about. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to do it. But I think that's the way to fund it, however, whatever the conduit. And I would totally agree with all the history of good Lord Almighty, everything.
So what?
Really paramount importance that, you've got 15 people auditing it every other day. So there's not some story about how somebody borrowed money or.
So is the consensus that we should do a PAC and do it all through a PAC, or should we do a?
We have counsel for the statehood effort.
I beg your pardon?
we have counsel to the statehood effort?
Yes, attorneys, yes.
Right, so I would pose a question to them, what's the best structure?
And you can fundraise outside the district.
Exactly.
Right, but to answer Tom's question more specifically, in past years, there have been organizations like DC Vote that served as a conduit and to work with the party and elected
I know you have a game,
officials
so
to
I want to
create
know.
and as a, well, so they received funds to do that, but they also had funds that they received from the city. When Adrian 50 was mayor, at some point he was putting $1 million a year in education campaigns, and it went down over the years to, I think it's still probably up to about a couple $100,000 in this administration. But, surely there was a point where there was a larger bucket of money that organizations said, I can do education, and they did. And one of them was DC, but there are a number of others as well, but they're probably receiving the largest bulk of the money.
Eugene, another point I'd like to make, and I made it in a previous meeting as well, that is our time is so short, and you have all these questions of if you go to individual companies, who are they? Do they have business with the city? What's their relationship to politicians, etc. I think we have to go to the collectives. I think we have to go to business groups that are already formed, that already have collected dues, that have already built budgets. Hopefully they have a little bit of a slush fund here at this point in the fiscal year. But, Board of Trade, Chamber, FCC, etc., where it's just going to be quicker and cleaner to get money that doesn't come from individual businesses, so we don't have to make 150 visits to CEO offices. There's got to be 5 or 6 business collectives that we could go to quickly.
That's been
I agree.
Can it come from organizational staff?
Yeah. That's
No, as I said, we requested, we had like 20 questions we sent to campaign finance yesterday. And I don't want to presuppose their answers.
I think the Attorney General will get some of those questions as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're waiting, and hopefully that will sharpen it. But let's see. What I'd like to propose is that, we kind of reshape some of these ideas. Maybe it's going to be a smaller group exercise as we help frame recommendations that will go to the New Columbia State Commission on June 9th. There's not a lot of time. I think, a larger group exchange could probably happen, but I'd like to think that there's a smaller group that'd be willing to meet and fashion some of these ideas. If there's anyone who'd like to do that, I'd love to be able to have you. So are there any who might want to be a part of a kind of a smaller group as we kind of get the ideas we heard here tonight and kind of line it up in terms of what happens next and that possibility? Anyone? Yeah, we got 1, 2, a couple, 9. I think that's something to work with. I think once we use this conversation in minutes, you'll find that there's a lot of gold in them there here. Yes. And let's see, is there any other ideas that we should articulate? I know that we've been sitting on quite a few, but this is a tough one in terms of raising money for movements in a short time frame.
Well, again, I'm with the communications committee, and in terms of getting the word out, we've gotten a lot of requests for different materials, which will cost money to do printing. Ms. Perry was talking about 50,000 to the conventions. I would second that we need at least that much.
Yeah, that's probably too small.
Probably 100,000.
Yeah, but you need to do a reception at both conventions.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd say 100,000 is what I would prefer.
I think it'd be really important to have, because not just communications needs money, but all the groups who need money, to have them create a budget and have them send it to us, so we know by this date we need to raise this much money, and so that way we can have either tax or whatever entities to raise their, like do crowdsource, like do like GoFundMe accounts, because it's really easy to get.
Right. Very good point.
And then have them send you, have you send them a budget, like I need this amount, so we know like where to go forward.
That's a good idea. Like Anita Bonds and Pat Mara, they should get together and figure out for your conventions what's the minimum you need.
And I'll
But,
share
you know,
that.
I think that might be a good thing. I think what this group has to do is, like, starting tonight, decide what are workable mechanisms. And I can tell you when I get this opinion back by the end of the week. Like, if there is someone committed, I mean, I'm old school, I don't know about GoFundMe accounts and whatever that was the mayor was talking about. I don't know about those kind of online things. But, you know, if there's somebody that knows all the details about those accounts, I would like for you to say what it would take for you to start it. And I will ask campaign finance, can we do it? I'm not going to say, you know, go do it. If you say,